Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Libra on the 28th of March and a few other things besides. Now, this full moon is the first supermoon of 2021, and that means it's going to loom a little larger in the night sky or even in the day sky when we see that kind of ghostly luminous sphere. I personally don't think the supermoon factor makes a difference to the interpretation of a full moon. I just think it makes it more beautiful and we pay it more attention. And of course, the whole point of a full moon, if we're kind of sky watchers, is that we look at it and it causes us to reflect and review, whether on recent events or what's going on in our inner core. And so it's especially powerful when you have a full moon that's a little bit more dramatic than it normally is. Now, this full moon in Libra is, the full moon itself is in Libra, it's opposition the sun in Aries, but it's not just the sun in Aries, it's the sun and Venus. So we have a kind of double whammy on the themes of love and relationship, on unity and overcoming division. That's a really powerful message that this full moon brings. And that message is brought to all of us. But of course, if you're an Aries or if you're a Libra, or you have a birthday towards the end of September or the very end of March, then this full moon is going to be a little bit more important to you. And I'm going to address, this why it's important to Aries, why it's important to Libra, first of all, because I want to introduce again this notion that 6 months ago, there was a new moon in Libra, and that was in the middle of October. And now we've got the full moon. We had a beginning in the middle of October, and we have an ending. And the full moon theme, of course, is always closure and completion. And we have that happening at this point at the end of March. So there's a link between these two time periods. And all you have to do is to try to think back and think, what did I begin? What started? What, new things came into being? Because they've reached a kind of halfway point at least, but possibly they're done and dusted. And I think whatever sign of the zodiac you are, you can do that same thing, checking back in the middle of October, events happening at that time. We'd even look at world events happening in that mid-October period. Remember, that was just before the general election in America and also the election in New Zealand. So we have some really quite important things going on at that time. So 6 months on, what are the ricochets from that? Now, for Aries, we're looking at the full moon in the area of relating. And of course, you've got a Sun-Venus conjunction in your sign anyway. So the whole theme of love, of finding love, of keeping love, of setting the date or making some plans to do with a romance, but, making it sort of, it's special, it's a special event. And so, as always with a full moon, when we think about the moon's effect on the tides of the oceans, the full moon and the moon, of course, have effects on the tides of our emotions too, even if that's just a symbolic way of looking at it. So we're always more emotional at full moon. Again, this is for all the signs to be aware of. But for Aries, let's think about being very emotional, whether it's to do with being over the moon happy, or whether it's quite the reverse and being completely stressed out and in pieces, probably related to someone in your life or a relationship. And in a way, it's pretty much the same for Libra as well, because for Libra, the moon is in your sign and the sun and Venus are in the area of relationships. So this is one of the important periods right through really until the end of April, or around about the 20th of April, that things to do with relationships zoom into the forefront, whether you're forming new alliances, that can be for business or friendship, doesn't have to be for romance, or whether you are indeed setting the date and doing something really important with your significant other. But we must look also at the full moon for this idea of making us full of emotional angst. And sometimes that provides a tipping point for a relationship. So as much as we're celebrating love and unity and non-division, we will, in some cases, be looking at the end of the road for a relationship. And so maybe the prospect of divorce or coming out of a company or breaking up some kind of working partnership. So those are the themes that we're working for, really, with both Libra and Aries. When we come to Cancer and Capricorn, these are the other two signs for whom this full moon is very important, because the full moon is occupying what we call the angular houses, the dynamic areas of the horoscope. So for Capricorn, that full moon is in the 10th house, the sun being in the 4th house. So we have this interplay between home and career, the outer world, things done in the full glare of the spotlight, and things that are very private, very close to home. And it can mean it's an opportunity, round about the 28th of March, to find a better work-life balance, for instance. But it could mark the end of a job or the end of living in a certain place, or it marks the end of something to do with a member of the family. Perhaps a member of the family is moving on, maybe a younger person heading off to university, and that will change the family dynamic, and it marks the end of a chapter for family life. So we're playing with those themes, endings and beginnings, and of course balance. The same thing really with Cancer, only for Cancer, we're looking at the full moon, the moon itself, in the 4th house of home and family, and we're looking at the sun dominating that area of career and life direction. I mean, while we're in the time of Aries, which means the sun is moving through your 10th house, it is a time to really focus on your material world and to think about the ambitions and aspirations you have and to make them real. So it may mean having meetings with people, even if they're virtual meetings, with a view to making something happen in the future. Or maybe we are very firmly in the area of career. So it's very much related to your career and making progress in your career. But still, we have the home coming into it, the home and the family. And so we're looking at that axis and seeing that it could be a time to move home, just as much as it may be for Capricorn, because we've got that particular axis involved. Now, another factor about this about this period of time is that a week before the full moon, the sun enters the sign of Aries, which means it begins the whole of the zodiac cycle. Aries begins the 12-sign journey through the zodiac. And if you think about Aries, you know anyone who's an Aries, well, you're looking at one right now, then we are fairly kind of feisty and forthright, and we enjoy beginning things and taking things at a bit of a lick. We like things to move fast. And in astrology, we can do a special chart for the moment the sun enters Aries, which is called an Ingress chart. And this is really used for what we call mundane astrology or political astrology. And we look at the sun's entry into Aries, and then later on in the year, 6 months later, we look at the sun into Libra, the Libra ingress. And of course, we've got the halfway points. We've got the 21st of June, which is the summer solstice, right? And the winter solstice on the 21st of December. So these 4 cardinal points, the 4 quarters of the year, they do set a kind of picture. They create a picture of what's going on. And it was very interesting. I mean, you can do one of these Aries Ingress charts for every country in the world, and you take it from the capital of that country. So obviously I don't have the time to do hundreds and hundreds of capital cities. So I just had a look at London, which of course gives the Aries Ingress picture for Great Britain. And I also looked at it for the USA. So if we take it for London at the moment, that Aries Ingress, you'll see that we've got a very nice setting here. We've got Jupiter, the planet of growth and expansion, right on the midheaven point in Aquarius. And we've got the Sun and Venus right up at the top of the chart there. So it's going to be a very go-ahead quarter, as you can see, for Great Britain. But the interesting thing is, look at that degree on the midheaven, which is 2021 of Aquarius. When we look at the Aries Ingress for the USA, guess what happens? That degree of Aquarius, or within a half a degree or so, now becomes the ascendant. So we've got Jupiter on the ascendant of the USA Ingress, Aries Ingress. Now that's a very ebullient kind of picture. We've got really a big kind of opening to this quarter, with America very front forward in every sense of the word. So again, we get a picture from the USA chart as well that this might actually be a pretty good quarter. I'm not going to go into it in terms of financial quarters, because obviously, even if the markets are doing well, that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the real economy and whether people are employed and earning enough money to keep themselves afloat. Obviously, in large part, that isn't the case. But we should see improvements. And well, as I said, I don't want to spend the whole of my video to you talking about the Ingress charts, but it is really a very interesting factor. Now, the other thing I wanted to look at in this couple of weeks that we have ahead of us is planet Neptune. Now, I talk about Neptune a lot because it's been very dominant. And if we look at what's coming up, we look on the 30th of March, and then we look on the 9th of April, we've got some really, really strong Neptune influences. On the 30th, we've got Mercury conjunct Neptune, and on the 9th, we've got Mars in Gemini squaring Neptune. And, these two kind of configurations kind of roll into one another. So we really do have a strong Neptunian influence during the upcoming days around that full moon and beyond it. And what happens with Neptune is that we don't always see things in their reality. So this theme that we've already got of feeling very buoyant and optimistic about the future, is that perhaps an illusion? That's what Neptune is indicating, perhaps. But also Neptune is saying, don't believe everything you hear, wherever it's coming from. So whatever forecasts are coming of doom and gloom, maybe we need a real dose of reality to really examine that forecast from. So throughout this period, keep your baloney meter going, because you need to check things out, do the backstory. Don't just take things on face value. And that'll be a very, very workable kind of tip for these next couple of weeks. Now, I want to come back and have a look at this full moon again. I want to actually look at the chart of the full moon. And I've set this again for London, just simply because that's where I happen to be right now. And so that's where I wanted to look at it from. And not only do we have that beautiful Sun-Venus conjunction, which is lending harmony into the mix, but we've got a grand trine. We've got a grand trine between, we've got the moon trining Saturn, trining Mars, because they're all in air signs. And it means over the course of the 28th, 29th, that beautiful triangle, as it were, is going to be very alive and well. And that really is also a kind of strong sense of, I don't want to say it's divine protection, that's maybe too strong, but there is a sense of cosmic harmony here. And it almost certainly means that regardless of the appearance of events, something really essentially good is happening behind them. And I think if you remember that as well, it adds to this general positivity of this period. And what I also thought of, because I wanted to look and see what this full moon did to various places in the world, whether it picked out something that was important. And on this occasion, because the interview with Oprah Winfrey and Prince Harry and Meghan has just really aired, and this couple is very much in the news, I did take a look and see whether this full moon coming up on the 28th of March was significant in any way. And it's certainly significant for Meghan. And if you look at her chart here, you'll see that the full moon cuts across her MCIC axis, the highest point in the chart and the lowest point in the chart. So we're looking at things to do with her life direction. So this full moon does close a chapter, but it opens another one. But the other thing that sort of fascinated me really about Meghan's chart, and if you look at the third house down there, you'll see it's a very crowded third house. There's the moon, there's Saturn, and of course there's Jupiter as well. And one of the things that came out of that interview was the idea that she'd been silenced. And when you think about Saturn in the third house, that is where your voice is. It's the area of communication. And of course, for Meghan, it's very important that her voice is heard. And what happens with Saturn in there is that sometimes it's a struggle to get your voice heard. And she introduced this idea of the Little Mermaid and talked about the mermaid wasn't allowed to speak, but she found her voice in the end. And I think with all that Saturn, throughout that period where she was incredibly unhappy in London, Saturn was in Capricorn, it was floating around her sixth house and coming up towards her ascendant. And of course, just more recently, Saturn has been squaring its natal, not its natal position, but been squaring her sun or shortly to square her sun, but her Mercury, which is, of course, her voice as well. So all these things made a kind of profound sound to me. And I like to show you astrology at work, living astrology, so you can see how these various configurations and planetary transits and natal charts really do speak their truth once you start to really look into them. So I think I've sort of finished talking about the aspects that are to come, and especially that full moon in Libra on the 28th. But I also was reminded as I was looking at these next couple of weeks, and I was thinking about, have you ever played Snakes and Ladders? You go up some wonderful ladders and down some dreary snakes. And astrology is a bit like that sometimes. We have some really difficult aspects and transits, and they're like snakes. They take us right down back to the beginning again. And then we have some ladders which take us up. We move forward, we grow. And life is really like that. It's it is a cycle, but it's more a wave. Our life isn't an arrow from beginning to end, so to speak. It's a series of waves. And we go from the dreary lows to the great highs. And I was thinking when I looked at this beautiful Sun-Venus conjunction and lots of the other things that are in harmony, because, the Sun in Aries and Venus in Aries are harmoniously linked to Jupiter and Saturn as well. So we've got some really, really nice kind of harmonies here. So we want to make the most of it because life doesn't go on being like that. And if we're playing around with these themes of unity and connection and non-division, we can make them a reality during this period of time. And of course we look out in the world and we think, oh well, we want nations to be happy with nations, and we want our leaders and our political parties to not be always at daggers drawn, and that might be a bit of a big ask. But we can certainly do something about our own lives where we see division and where we want or can produce harmony. And with these influences, we can definitely ride that wave. And I think when we do that, we feel great. If we've made an effort and we embrace those beautiful themes, then they do tend to have a very positive effect on our thinking and our being. And I'm going to leave you with that very positive thought. And I look forward to the next time I see you all. And of course, you can catch up with me on Astrology, whether it's my audios, whether it's my forecasts, or all the things that I tend to do. Bye for now.